I started contracting in '97, working for the post office, and thankfully my contract was outside of IR35, whereas my colleagues' contracts were inside, and that's mainly because I was taking quite a lot of risk. I had multiple companies at the time, and my colleagues had actually taken, some of them had taken this loan opportunity to try and maximise their income. Unfortunately, as the years progressed, they did have that compliance check. They did get found out, and unfortunately they had to pay most of that back. So they literally had to start from scratch again because they were left penniless, mainly because they'd spent most of the money that they earned, and they were promised that the loans wouldn't have to be repaid, and I think that was the main problem. So in 2000. April 2000, when IR35 was formed, we found that it was just, the onus was actually put onto the contractor. It wasn't until April 2017, with the off-payroll reforms, that the emphasis was actually put on the end client to determine whether a contract fell inside of IR35 or outside. I'd like to just understand the demographic of our audience and also see if you're awake. It is a bit risky, yes, but if you could raise your hand if you've heard of the term IR35, obviously before this meeting. Thank you. There's quite a lot of you. That's really good. And how many of you have worked in the public sector? That's very good. That's more than I thought. And how many of you are concerned about IR35 and how it may affect you in either the private or public sector moving forward? Personally. Okay, thank you. That's I'm intrigued by that actually. Okay, so we've covered quite a lot about payroll reform, so I'm not going to recover on that. But I'm going to explain about my experiences. So I've worked at Home Office and Ministry of Justice. Now in April 2017, when the reforms were brought in, I felt and I saw my fellow contractors were in a tough situation because they were all going to lose their contracts. They were all told that they are likely to leave employment and leave their contracts. So that was a time when I felt I had to do something. I've earned a few pennies. I wanted to come out of the industry, and I thought this is the time to come out. So, although I formed Ajay in '97, in 2017, I became a recruitment organisation, a professional recruitment agency, working pretty much for the public sector. So I took everyone on board, and I offered them the opportunity to come to me, and I could give them any option that would work for them. So I offered them either, if it's an in-scope contract, to actually employ them, to offer them an umbrella opportunity to try and maximise their returns through child credits or through charitable donations or whatnot. And I also offered them the opportunity to work as a consultant, to carry on working through their limited companies, as long as their contracts were deemed to be out of scope. So I felt by doing that I could actually offer it to the Cabinet Office. So I approached the Cabinet Office, they put me in touch with all of these organisations, and I managed to started to provide contracts to all of these organisations. So I'm glad to say over the last year we've had 25 contracts, which is a good start, but I'm looking to build on that. So we cover the government legal department is where we're spending most of our time at the moment with the Ministry of Justice. So I have quite a few lawyers that I employ to work on Brexit.
Sounds like they need a new one, do it?
And I'm just there to support them. So obviously I'm not as experienced as they are, but they're doing a fantastic job. And as long as they stay in employment, then I stay in business. So I suppose that's a good thing. So I'd just like to say, as an agency, some of the issues that we face, and it all comes down to trying to find the ideal contract, trying to match people for those jobs. So it's understanding it comes down to their CVs. And I find that when candidates apply, they tend not to disclose any public sector experience that they've had. And that actually goes against them, because when you're placing someone in the public sector, any work that they've done in the public sector really does count. So documenting that is not a bad thing, and that really does help in me placing them in roles. The next thing is to obviously identify the strongest candidates for the roles. But we have to understand the candidate inside out. We need to understand whether they're suitable for the job, whether they've got the abilities to do the job. We won't put them forward unless we feel that we can actually fulfill their dreams and get them that job that they desire. Another issue that we have is security clearances. So with security clearances, it's not often understood whether clearance has lapsed, whether it can transfer across to the next sponsor. And usually, there's different levels of clearances. I won't talk about it in detail, but the popular one at the moment is security clearance, was SC clearance. You have to use it within 12 months of where you've used it last, and it's transferable within those 12 months. After the 12 months, it's no longer transferable. So that's the panic that a lot of contractors have trying to get back into industry. Having the SC clearance, having to leave their contract, and then moving on to the next contract. It's very, very tough for them. But unless they get sponsored, they can't really carry on in an SC cleared job. And lastly, I mentioned that obviously it's very difficult to provide good contracts to companies, but GDPR compliance is so important to agencies, and I find that a lot of agencies are probably falling foul of that. And possibly we need to review where we stand in terms of GDPR compliance. But candidates' thinking, I think, needs to change as well. The vast majority of candidates, I find, they're still in the outer scope bubble, and they will only look for an outer scope contract. And the problem with that is outer scope contracts are becoming more and more scarce. And as time's moving on, we're getting more in-scope contracts. You'll find everyone on the board, on this banner, are in-scope. The only agencies or the only organisations which operate as out of scope are Home Office, Ministry of Justice, Department of Transport occasionally do, but as mentioned in Philip's book, he mentions that National Rail, 99% of employees are forced to go under an umbrella. So this is the case, and this is the issue that we have with the Department of Transport. It only tends to be project managers that are taken on out of scope. So, as we said, IR35 is due to be implemented in the public sector on the 6th of April. Contractor rates are dramatically decreasing, and at the same time, the assurances for contract extensions are decreasing. We're only having, on average, a 3-month contract as presented to candidates. And the risk of extension is high, of non-extension is high. Contracts tend to only be for 3 months. And I emphasise the fact about risk. Candidates often face high levels of risk. Surely, if candidates are facing so much risk, they shouldn't be deemed in scope of IR35. They're carrying that risk, they should be paid for that, because they have to have the insurances in place, but they should be out of scope, and we challenge a lot of these contracts. And I'm pleased to say that 100% of the challenges that we've made, we've won. So if you're in doubt, the 3 of you that raised your hands, then I'll be able to help you if you need any support. So I do believe that there's this opportunity for an upward rate adjustment for out of scope contracts, but also for in-scope, because we have to understand and appreciate that freelancers, contractors, self-employed individuals have got skills in the industry, and we shouldn't lose those skills. And by applying so much pressure, they're going to go elsewhere, they're going to change, they're going to come out of the industry totally, and we need to keep them in the industry. So my last pitch, if you're looking for a professional job, send your CV to me and I'll try and help. Thank you.